Good morning. I wanted to, in this new term, change things up a bit and record myself setting the work for the lessons. So maybe I can give just a little bit more information and a bit of explanation that you don't get when I just type up the instructions. I'll still put the basic instructions on Edmodo like I have been doing, but hopefully these just short clips to introduce the lesson and tell you what you need to do will help you to move through the work. I'm really pleased with the work you've been doing so far. Lots of people have handed lots of work in. It's really good. I can see you're working really hard at home. That's excellent. I know it's not always easy to work effectively at home. It can be difficult to motivate yourself. So I'm really pleased that that lots of you've done some really good work. Just a quick review then on some of the bits and pieces we've done so far. We've been looking at how different things, different activities can help narrow that development gap. So that difference between the poorest countries and poorer countries and countries that are more developed, how we can close that gap between them. And in other words, really help less economically developed countries to develop and become wealthier. And there are different things we've looked at. So one of the things is trade. The important thing to remember about trade is this isn't, it's not sort of some sort of charity or anything like that. Trade benefits everybody. So that's just, doing business with other countries. So we buy and sell things from many, many other countries around the world. If you've been watching the news about PPE and how we're trying to buy that from Turkey and China. It's a good example. We buy things from these countries, and of course, in those countries there are factories making that stuff and making money when we buy it from them. Well, that movement of money to a country that's making something that we're buying will of course help in that country for it to develop. It creates jobs, it creates money, and so on. And there are many, many examples of that all around the world. Countries that maybe sell raw products, so food, for example, up to sort of manufactured products. Can also be services. So our own country, one of the things that we sell, if you like, to other parts of the world are financial services, like banking. So it's not something you can actually see and touch, but it's a service that's sold. So trade happens between countries. And you can make an argument about how much that does or doesn't help poorer countries. In some ways, of course, it does help them because they may be selling something and getting money from it that they otherwise wouldn't have had. Another way of looking at it, though, is sometimes it's a bit exploitative. So, they don't get the best deal. They put a lot of hard work maybe into growing crops, but then we buy them at a very cheap price. So we get most of the benefit, and I say we, as in richer countries get more of the benefit, whereas the producers don't really don't do as well out of it. So that's trade. We then, a lot of you had some good examples of fair trade and what that is. So fair trade, same thing as trade. We're not on charity or anything here. We're trading. But what fair trade does is it recognises that sometimes the world price of things isn't really fair. What we pay for cocoa, sometimes that price is so low, the farmers in developing countries who are growing that and harvesting it for us, it's not fair for how much work they've put in. So what fair trade does is it sort of sets a bottom price. It says, well, we'll never pay you less than this. We're going to pay you this fair price. The other thing that quite often happens is there's an element of a community payment. So when that cocoa gets turned into chocolate bars and sold, and the chocolate company makes a big profit, some of that profit they'll then put back into the community where the cocoa was grown. So the cocoa farmers get a fair price, but in addition, in the area where they live, maybe some of the profit is fed back into medical facilities or education for children. They're sort of common examples of things that might be done. So fair trade, and you've probably seen that sort of fair trade logo on various things. Maybe you buy chocolate bars, bananas, coffee. There's lots of examples. Can really help. So that's trade. Not to be confused with aid. Aid, I suppose you say that is like charity. That's giving money, whether it's in the form of money or not, but giving money to countries to help them develop. I suppose is generally, seen as a good thing. Sometimes an argument against it that some countries can become overly dependent on aid, so they need countries to sort of give them money or similar. And it's hard for them to move out of that cycle and be able to do things for themselves. But generally speaking, I think most people would agree that giving aid is a good thing. Loads of examples of this: CAFOD, Oxfam. There's loads of examples of British Red Cross and so on. It can be in the form of money given directly. Quite often, though, it's in the form of specific projects. So the money maybe is spent on certain things like mosquito nets. And those mosquito nets are distributed in areas around the world where people catch malaria, which you catch from mosquitoes. And if they have mosquito nets, much less likely to catch malaria, the death rate comes down, for example. And there were some other examples in the book as well. Laptops for schools and improve education. So that's trade, aid, and also fair trade. There's also some information that you looked at about debt. This is where countries have borrowed money in the past and they're still sort of paying it back. And a lot of these poor countries, it's like they'll never manage to pay it back. So there's a big call to sort of wipe out countries' debts. Interestingly, if you watched Pope Francis' address on Easter Sunday, he mentioned that he called for this would be a good time now for wealthier countries to wipe out the debts of poorer countries. There's also something about micro loans. So a loan is money that you'd have to pay back. The reason it's called a micro loan is because it's a very small loan given to an individual. So it's not huge amounts of money given to a country and its government, but rather a smaller amount of money that's given to individuals. Interestingly, where this has worked really well, so one of them is in India, and the microloan company is called the Grameen Bank. And those loans are given predominantly, mainly given to women, because it's found they're much less likely to waste the money. I think men sometimes aren't so careful with money and waste it maybe, but they found they got much better results when they gave the loans to women. And the idea is that the women would start their own little business with this quite small amount of money and then be able to pay the money back, but sort of start their own business and then make their own money. And actually that's been very successful in a number of parts of the world. So that's what microloans are. So that's pretty much where we're up to. I will be looking, I've not looked at all the work that everyone's submitted yet. It takes me a little while to go through on Edmodo. It's quite slow, but I'll be doing that over the next couple of days. So keep an eye out. I'll just give you a brief bit of feedback on the work you've done. The work for, well, it's not today's lesson. I'm putting it up to date for Wednesday's lesson. Is on pages 266 and 267 in the textbook. And it's a case study about tourism in Tunisia. Tourism, I suppose, is just another way that countries areas within countries can make money, sometimes based on their natural beauty, their climate, the fact that people want to go and visit, because a lot of countries, even though maybe they're struggling with development, they have very beautiful nature, very beautiful climates, historic sites, and Tunisia is quite a good example of those things. So if you read the case study, it tells you a bit about Tunisia, why people would want to go there, and so on. So it tells you all about that. So have a read about that. It also tells you a little bit about why sometimes if you rely only on tourism, it can be a problem. And Tunisia experienced this quite seriously a couple of years ago, and it tells you about it in the case study, but sort of very briefly. It was doing very well with tourism. Lots of people go in, so when people go, they spend their money in hotels, restaurants, and so on. So lots of people locally can make money from tourism. But what unfortunately happened in Tunisia, and you might remember seeing it, the area of Tunisia, the resort was called Sousse. There were some terrible terrorist attacks. And what that meant was that people were then scared to go there on holiday, and it wasn't safe for a time, and so on. So they had this sort of this economy, this tourist economy doing quite well, but then almost overnight it was shut down because of these sort of also awful terrorist attacks, and that's lasted for a long time because of the questions about security. So have a read of that case study. I'll put the exact instructions of what I want you to do on Edmodo, but essentially what I'd like you to do is have a read of it. The first thing is to write a paragraph about why it's a suitable place for tourism, why it's done quite well with tourism so far, so why people are attracted to going there and so on. You can include in that information about the climate, which on page 267 there's a graph that shows you the climate, so you can interpret that graph a little bit and say how it's got a nice climate. So give me some numbers and data about when in the year the climate's nice, how much rainfall they have, the temperature and so on. So a little bit of graph work there. And then the second thing ought to be to talk about some of the problems if you rely only on tourism, which there are some general problems, but as I said, Tunisia's got some quite specific issues that you can obviously mention. Okay, I'll put those instructions in written format as well, but that's the work for Wednesday's lesson, and I'll set something else for Thursdays. Okay, I hope you're all well and keeping safe. All the best.